Hello, the next story is King Midas and the Golden Touch. King Midas of Phrygia was the richest man on earth. Chests of gold, silver and jewels filled his treasure house. Midas had more money than anyone could imagine, but that was not enough. "More gold," he muttered, sinking his arms elbow deep into his coin chests. "More jewels," he exclaimed, as rubies and diamonds ran through his fingers. "More, more, more," he shouted to the walls of his treasure house. The echo answered, "More." The god Dionysus happened to be walking by. He heard strange cries coming from the treasure house. He looked through the barred window and saw King Midas rolling in a great pile of gold coins. He looked like a pig wallowing in mud. The ridiculous sight made Dionysus laugh. King Midas stopped rolling and looked up. "Are you laughing at me?" he said. "Of course I am," said Dionysus. "Don't you realise how silly you look?" "I don't care what you think," Midas replied. "I love money and I want as much as I can get." You should think less about getting money and more about giving. Why not use your wealth to help poor, hungry people? Your money does no good lying in your treasure house. You may as well bury it in the ground. "Give my money away? You must be mad," Midas exclaimed. "I wish that everything I touched could turn to gold." Dionysus shook his head. "Do you really think the golden touch would bring you happiness?" "I know it would," Midas answered. "Let's find out." Dionysus whispered a secret word known only to the gods. Then he disappeared. "What a strange fellow," Midas said. "Anyone who thinks that giving money away makes people happy must be crazy. I can't have crazy people wandering around my kingdom. I'll send some soldiers and I'll lock him up." Midas stepped outside his treasure house. He pulled the heavy door shut and locked it with an iron key. Suddenly, the door began to shimmer. It grew so bright that Midas had to cover his eyes. When he opened them, he discovered something amazing. The great oak and iron door had turned to gold. So had the key in his hand. Midas danced along the path to his garden. "I have the golden touch," he shouted. "The gods have granted my wish. I am the happiest man alive." Midas ran through his garden, touching the trees and the flowers. They all turned to gold. So did the water in the pond, the frogs on the lily pad, the fish swimming below in the cool depths. Midas walked across the grass. He left golden footprints wherever he stepped, as the green grass beneath his sandals turned to gold too. Midas was so happy that he did not notice how his garden had changed. Gold flowers gave off no fragrance. The golden leaves of the trees rattled in the wind like a noisy tambourine. No fish splashed. No frogs croaked. Golden grass scratched Midas's ankles like sharp wire. All the colours of the garden had disappeared. There was only one colour now, gold. Midas ran off to his palace. He told his servants to prepare a feast to celebrate his good fortune. He summoned his family and friends to share the feast with him. The servants brought tasty dishes from the kitchen. They brought jugs of rare wine up from the cellar. Midas lifted his wine cup. It turned to gold in his hand. Everyone at the table gasped. "A toast to the richest king on earth, who is about to become richer," said Midas. "To the king," everyone at the table replied. They all drank, except for Midas. As soon as the wine touched his lips, it turned to gold. He set his cup aside. "Let the feast begin," he ordered. The guests began eating. Midas tried to eat too, but every morsel that entered his mouth turned into gold. Midas's cat, Niobe, jumped onto his lap. At once she turned to gold. His dog, Ajax, nuzzled his hand. As soon as the dog touched his master's fingers, he also turned to gold. A look of horror crossed Midas's face. The guests stared at the king. No one knew what to do. Phoebe, Midas's daughter, rose from her seat. "Father, what is wrong? Are you ill?" she asked. Before Midas could stop her, she placed her hand on his forehead. Instantly, like the cat and the dog, she turned into a golden statue. Midas threw himself from his chair. He rolled on the floor, moaning, "I am the richest of kings and the poorest of humankind. Now I understand what the gods meant to teach me. The golden touch is a curse, not a blessing. It has destroyed my daughter and the creatures that were dear to me. What use is my wealth? It cannot buy me a cup of cold water or a crust of dry bread. Now I know what it means to be hungry, thirsty, frightened, and alone. Too late I have learned what is really important. Better that I had been a good man instead of a rich one." "You were always a good man. Your eyes were blinded by the glitter of gold," a voice said. Midas looked up. Dionysus stood before him in all his glory. Midas bowed to the god. "Forgive me for my greed. Forgive me for caring only about myself." "You have learned your lesson. There is no reason to torture you." Dionysus whispered the secret word, and the air shimmered with the colours of the rainbow. Midas shut his eyes. When he opened them, he found himself sitting at his feast. Phoebe stood at his side, telling him about an adventure that she'd had with her friends. Ajax nuzzled his hand. Niobe sat purring in his lap. "Bring me a cup of water and some bread," Midas said. Never had food or drink tasted so good. He touched the trays, the napkins, the tablecloth. He sighed with relief. Nothing turned to gold. A breeze from the garden carried the fragrance of roses through the window. The golden touch was gone forever. "Throw open the doors of my palace," Midas said. "Invite everyone from the kingdom to share my feast. Unlock my treasure house. Give the poor people whatever they need." From that day on, no one in Midas's kingdom went without food, clothing, or a place to live. The king gave away money to all who needed it. Midas was no longer the richest king on earth, but he was surely the most beloved. That made him richer still.